Okay, thank you. We're live from our broadcast studio here at the PAC. Our guest today, this is Council Connections. Our guest today is Larry Randolph, the current and future president, or chairperson of the Land Conservation Committee. By acclamation, you got it. You're there for till you're not wanting it anymore. It's optional.
Yes, and who would take over?
That's your job to find out. I knew when I had it, I had a successor in line, and he had volunteered. So first, a little bit of a report from the Residents' Council. We meet on alternate Thursdays. We had a meeting this morning. A couple of topics that came up. You may have read in Michelle's message earlier this week that the concept of pods, which had been an active talking point for a while, that seems to have gone away. We all agree that with the projection of almost universal vaccinations here, that a pod would not be advancing anything. It'd be duplicative of the potential and hopeful reopenings of some dining opportunities and some card games and some visitation, as in pre-October, not pre-COVID. So pods might not accomplish anything more than that. So it's kind of on hold for a while. Another thing that came up this morning was that because we are not as social as we used to be, that there are new people moving in who are not getting the opportunities that we all had when we moved in to socialize with their neighbors and other residents. So if you happen to see somebody you don't know, take them in and say hello like we all used to. Now we can't spend so much time talking. You see a name tag you haven't seen before, say hello. If somebody new moves into your hallway and you encounter them, greet them, ask them if you can help them. I know the Welcome Committee is doing an enormous job, but people still wander around and would like to know more about what's going on and who their neighbors are. Additionally, we talked about the need for re-advertising, if you will, the fact that if you see something wrong in the building, I'm talking about mechanically now or physically, not visitors who aren't supposed to be here, that a work order would be in order for that. Specifically, some people have noticed that some of the doors to the outside don't always close securely. If you see that, tell concierge and they'll fill out a work order for us, for you. We all have been, at least all of us in the room here, and we do have a couple of guests off camera, we all have been vaccinated. We all need to recognize that the Institute for Family Health went above and beyond in providing space and staff. I just found out this morning that our management here had provided lunch to the Institute staff for both days that they worked. I think Michelle told me it was pizzas one day and deli the other. Also some candies and some scented candles and some other things, and they plan to do that again for the next round. So thank you, management. Also, thank you, Institute for Family Health. And any of you who care to send a thank you along to that organization, their address and contact information was also in one of Michelle's recent publications. The Residents' Council also continues to urge residents here to the extent you're comfortable doing so, write letters to the governor and or other elected officials supporting the governor relaxing visitation opportunities or visitation regulations for those in the nursing home and hopefully for others. So next month for Council Connections, before I forget, you're going to get a break in that we will have two of our council members different council members sitting where I am interviewing other department heads or other committee chairs. Ginny Esser is going to interview Ginny Cannon from the Library Committee, and then Michelle Cacavano will be interviewing Al Chasen from the Art Scope. So we're excited about that. And then when we get to March, Joan Hollister and Bill Smith will be in the first chair in March, and then in the second one, it'll be Annette Johnson and Billy Smith. So the Smiths will take over for March. Now, let me introduce Larry Randall, who needs no introduction. He's a former Residence Council president, but is currently president of the Land Conservation Committee. So Larry, what's your committee up to?
Well, let me start by painting a little bit of background picture.
Wherever you want.
There may be some question as to what the origin of the committee was and what has been doing in a very general sort of way since then. It was formed just about exactly 10 years ago, early in 2011, and it was formed at that time under the name the Millbrook Preserve Committee, and there's a good explanation for that name. You need to back up for a moment. You need to know, first of all, that contrary to what I'm sure a lot of residents think, the property of Woodland Pond isn't just the buildings, the variety of buildings and the various roads that connect them. There is a wooded area at the front of the property between the Circular Road and North Putt Corners Road. And then there's a separate wooded property below the cottages to the west and going a bit down slope as you look off in the distance towards the mountain ridge. And those two properties are each under separate conservation easements, which restrict in various ways the kinds of activities and the kinds of so-called improvements that can be made on those properties. So so now you need to know that what is now being called the Millbrook Preserve, which is not part of Woodland Pond property, that is an immediately adjoining property that is jointly owned by the village and the town of New Paltz. Going way back, it wasn't always a preserve. Going back a number of years, there was the idea, the vision of combining the town and the village parts of that property into a preserve, a nature preserve. Well, because it immediately abuts the Woodland Pond property, the part that lies to the west of the cottages, there were various and sundry townspeople who thought, well, you know, maybe Woodland Pond should consider donating or just deeding over or in some way conveying to the town and the village our wooded property, which by the way includes a beaver pond, to be incorporated into that proposed preserve. Well, to make a long story short, that never happened, and it's not likely it ever would have or could have happened, but it did raise the concern in the minds of a number of residents as to who is going to be watching over the development of what has become to be called the Millbrook Preserve, and who is going to ensure that because it does directly join our property, who's going to be kind of keeping an eye on things to ensure that no impermissible uses of our property occur with or without our knowledge. So anyway, what we then called the Millbrook Preserve Committee was formed, and that was its chief brief back in the early days. As time has gone by, our property has had first one and then another trail developed. The first of which goes down behind, starts off of Danskin Way and goes down behind, starting with cottage number 8 and then continuing around halfway around approximately to what eventually had positioned a observation platform with a good view of the beaver pond. And that was named for the for Doug McBride, one of the very early residents here, who was an avid hiker. I can remember long before I came here because I was part of a small hiking group that I ended up on a couple of hikes with him and got to know him a little bit. But anyway, he became the initial chair of the committee, and
I happened to have the document with me.
Oh, good. And in any case, so that after his passing, that initial trail was named for him. And then sometime later on, a trail was developed from the other end of the cottages, starting with 101 and going down and meeting the McBride Trail, more or less where the what became an observation deck was built. That deck, by the way, was put up largely, if not exclusively, with the work of the Bruderhof. So that was one of their community-oriented projects, obviously. In any case, so we now have those two trails in place. And one of our concerns in recent times has been the suitable maintenance of those trails and such improvement as can be made to them, still consistent with the restrictions of our easements, to open up the use of those trails to as many residents here as possible. Clearly, a woodland trail isn't probably ever going to be suitable for, say, a motorized a wheelchair or something of the sort. But it would be nice to have those trails maintained in a better state to allow more people who are at least somewhat mobile to go down and make use of the trails and get down to that platform and look at the beaver pond and whatever wildlife may be observed from there. So anyway, because we are now calling ourselves the Land Conservation Committee because we have moved away from a strictly an interest in what the Millbrook Preserve is doing, although we certainly still do have that very much in our minds, but we're also at least equally concerned with the appropriate use of the Woodland Pond property and the proper maintenance of it.
And that's much more recent. That's more like 3 years back to 4 years back that the shift is coming in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
And so you reminded me when you said that during the 10-year celebration here about a year and a half ago, that an initiative of this committee, and I forget who was in charge then, but we decided we wanted to get as many people down there as we could. So I think it was pretty much June Feiner arranged for the one of the Woodland vans or two of the vans to have
Right.
people come down on maybe 4 different Saturdays or during the week. And we
Right.
probably had a total of, help me somebody, 40 or 50 people among all the things. So we thought that was pretty good. And some had their devices. Some just got off the bus and looked. Some went around the retention pond, but some walked down to the beaver pond. It's just a downhill walk and then back up or continued all the way out. So I was pretty happy to see that many people get down there and enjoy themselves. We had all good days for that.
Yeah. Well, and as a matter of fact, thank you for bringing that up because this past year, 2020, we started out, of course, in complete ignorance of what the year was going to bring for us. So we had it in mind that we would repeat in 2020 this arrangement for guided walks on appropriate occasions, again, down to as far as people cared to go and see what's to be seen and so on. So, of course, COVID got us in its grip, and that whole idea went by the boards. But
so for you folks who are new and haven't been down here, it's totally self-guided. You can get down there. You don't need a guide or a map or anything. The trails are quite wide and quite easy to stay on. And our intent was to offer the opportunity for new people to get down there with a seasoned person and have some things pointed out to you, but you're welcome to go on your own. You're
Right.
welcome to go on your own anytime.
Yeah, there are a few short stretches of the trail which tend to be, depending on the weather, a little bit muddy. And we would very much like to see those sections improved, probably with the placing of an appropriate type of gravel or other surfacing material to make those portions of the trail less muddy and easier to walk on. So we have put in a request to the management here for come spring for purchase of gravel. And it's my most recent understanding is that we need to renew that request come spring, and it will then be taken under advisement. Mark Eisenhandler, who, as some of you know, is our resident arborist, among other landscape-oriented duties, he has expressed a willingness to actually put the gravel in place when and if it is delivered here.
So now you mentioned the two trails, but isn't there another newer trail that?
Yes, there is a newer, relatively short stretch of trail, which starts a little ways to the north of the observation platform, which goes down the down slope past the spring, and which is still flowing this time of year. I was down there a week or two ago, and then eventually it meets up with a trail which goes down to and enters the Millbrook Preserve property. Anyway, that trail was conceived by and is now dedicated to our late one-time president, chair, named Keith Labuddy. So it's called Keith's Way, and there is a suitably rustic wooden sign on a tree at the head of that trail, where it departs from the other two trails I've already mentioned, and then heads downhill. It's a little more difficult walking, mainly because it is on a bit of a slope. So that would be a bit more challenging for some folks than the two main trails that I've already mentioned. But we had a dedication ceremony for anyone who cared to attend.
Were there any refreshments?
I don't recall there being any
I
refreshments.
recall there being refreshments. They weren't consumed, but they were.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yes, sorry. I wasn't thinking of them so much as
Tell the story,
refreshments.
Larry. You were there.
It was refreshments, like a bottle of champagne is a refreshment when it's broken against the bow of a new ship.
Correct. That's correct. Same.
But in any case,
A couple of beers were poured over the sign and
right,
passed around the crowd a little bit when we could still be a crowd.
right. So,
But that trail is maintained formally by the staff here, but much more informally by some of the people in the room. I know you go down there. I know Paul does. I'll go down there and pick a few sticks off and all that. And over time, it's now much more defined, although not marked, trail than it was when I moved in.
yeah. Well, and but you talk about, having worked on it and so on. I mean, that continues to be, as I've already mentioned, one of our big concerns is making sure that the existing trails are properly maintained. And sometimes some of the members of this committee go down there with pruning shears or what have you. But any heavy-duty maintenance really needs to be done by the staff here, by Tom Tango's crew in one way or another.
Now that they have that nice vehicle to get down there with,
Right.
better for them.
Yeah, the golf cart or whatever.
Well, they can
it's
take some
called.
tools down with them, have to haul them all down.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So It's also interesting to know that going back to the original purpose of this committee when formed 10 years ago, that there still is an active uh, uh, interchange between our committee, the Land Conservation Committee, and the folks managing the Millbrook Preserve, which actually formally, legally came into existence roughly 2 years ago. I forget exactly what the date was, but so now that village town combined property of over 100 acres is under active management. There's a woman named Julie Safer Lillis, that's Lillis, who is the manager. And she has proven to be, she's quite an enthusiastic person. And for anyone who has been down on any of the trails that preserve has, you will have noticed, first of all, that the trails in existence a couple of 3 years ago have been improved, better marking, and so on and so forth. But there have been some new trails added, including the one of perhaps the most interest to residents of Woodland Pond. There is a trail blazed with the color orange that leads off of Danskin Way. If you go out Danskin Way from the cottages and continue on, you'll pass a guardrail, a metal highway guardrail, and then past the end of that will be a fire hydrant. And about 100 feet beyond that fire hydrant, you'll find a pretty well marked entrance to the Orange Trail. And if you take that in, that goes in for maybe possibly a quarter or a third of a mile, and then meets up with the rest of the Millbrook Preserve network of trails. And there are maps posted at each of the trail junctions. And then, of course, you can also go, like with almost everything else in the universe these days, they have a website, and you can find on that a map which you can print out should you want to do so. Julie Lillis that I mentioned, she has come to a couple of our meetings and reported on their activities, and has been very obliging in trying to cooperate with us. She was originally scheduled to give us a presentation with an illustrated presentation last spring, but again, that was put off by the virus. So, but she continues to be interested in working with us, and I'm interested to report that at least 3 that I know of, 3 members of the Land Conservation Committee have become volunteer trail stewards in the Millbrook Preserve.
And more, not more people, but more duties. Hasn't Paul done the signs for them as well?
All
So,
of the signs?
Paul,
Have you done all the signs? The wooden
Yeah.
signs?
so the wooden signs that mark the trails and intersections and
Right.
turns on the trails were all done by Paul Farges,
Yeah.
who's in the audience, but is a member of our committee, but also a good liaison with the Millbrook Preserve. He was attending their board meetings when they were a little more in their formative stages, and now he gets the reports and tells us what's going on, but it's pretty much nothing lately. But my point was, we do have a good and ongoing working relationship with them that's getting better all the time.
Right.
Is what Larry just said, that we have at least 3 and maybe more people down there working from time to time.
Right.
So I have one more question for you. You may have more to say. Have there been any work parties down there? And if so, has anything interesting happened on any of them?
Well, there's at least one work party that I was a participant on, and that would have been, let's see, time is always running away from me here, but would have been in 2018, I think, already.
Sounds about right.
Anyway, the purpose of that work party was to go down mainly to improve the view, make the view from the observation deck less obstructed. Things, of course, have a habit of growing, and so you need to keep after it to make sure that the view isn't too seriously compromised. So anyway, that involves getting into the shrubs and the bushes and so on. And in one particular notable incident, a couple of the members, including Dave right here, had an unfortunate encounter with some stinging insects.
They had us outnumbered for sure, right?
So,
Some of you else were there too. Some of you guys there? I know Paul and Larry. There's about 6 of us went down.
yeah, Keith.
After we meet on Friday afternoon, so it was about 3:30, 3:45 on a Friday afternoon, and we all thought that it'd be a good idea, since we had some energy, to go back to our garages and whatever, and pick up some tools and go on down there and beat that brush down to the ground. Well, the bees had other ideas once we got into it, and we did a detour.
Right. So,
They won. But I was down there the other day, and some of the larger things that we did take down still make a difference. You still
Right.
get a really, really nice view from there.
right.
It hasn't overgrown.
Right. Yeah. Of course, the views tend to be a little bit better, or at least different, in the wintertime because there's no foliage on
Right.
the trees and so on. Of course, it's less likely that most folks will want to go down there in the wintertime, but if you are so inclined, you'll get a pretty nice view. Sometimes the pond is covered with ice and or snow, and makes it just a little bit different to look at. One thing, speaking of the pond, there's one thing I want to mention for sure before we wrap anything up here. At its most recent meeting, the Land Conservation Committee voted unanimously to honor 2 of our longest term members. That would be the late Ann Smith and her husband, Ray, not late, Ray, and by naming the beaver pond for them. That is, we plan, of course, to have an appropriate ceremony with a suitable plaque of some sort when the warmer weather gets around, and when COVID releases its grip enough so that we can have a suitable assembly of folks who are interested. And I should mention that one of the reasons that this is particularly appropriate, this naming is particularly appropriate for Ann and Ray, is that they devoted an enormous amount of time since becoming residents of Woodland Pond way back at the beginning in investigating wildlife activities in and around the pond. And I think many residents who have been resident at least here for a couple of years or longer will recall more than one occasion when Ann, with the assistance of Ray, presented videos of beavers at work, and the deer and the coyotes and all the various other critters that are to be found down in and around the pond. And it's always remarkable thing, we think of New Paltz as being, well, not a city, of course, but a pretty well populated piece of property, piece of land. And it's always a bit surprising, I think, to a lot of folks as to just how much wildlife there is to be found so near to, a lot of residential properties. And so it was always interesting to see their
To watch
videos.
that, yeah. And they always did it with such passion too. They just, look what we got, look what we got. And
Yes.
When they were able to have the viewings in the pack, it'd be a pretty full house.
Oh,
It
yes.
was a nice show.
Oh,
A really
absolutely.
nice show.
Yeah, yeah.
Which reminds me, was able to advance that with Michelle the other day, and she said, yes, please go ahead, and Woodland Pond will cover the cost of a plaque.
Oh,
So,
excellent. Excellent.
At whatever materials are appropriate.
Well,
So
maybe
all you had to do is work out
maybe
the
a
wording.
nice granite.
Big stone.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't put a cap on the budget, so maybe that's so and maybe it's not. But yeah, they're very supportive of us doing that,
Good.
and also of the concept of for whom we are honoring.
Good.
So any particular accomplishments that you didn't touch on from last year? I know you had your annual report, but we only had a couple of meetings and we didn't.
Right. Yes, we had virtually, well, I think only 2 that I can recall,
And
meetings in
probably had 2
person.
different presidents at the 2 meetings, one for you and one for Tom, right?
I think that's right. Yes. Yeah. Tom early on, and then he escaped that obligation, and I took it on, which hasn't been all that onerous since we've had very few meetings in the meantime. But we hope to get back to a more regular schedule in the near future.
I think this is me talking on behalf of myself and nobody else, but I'm hoping that once everybody's vaccinated and we can go back to having meetings, we can put 10 people in the room again and have a meeting, probably with masks and social distancing, but at least be able to get in the same room and,
Right.
maybe move our agenda along a little
Sure.
bit.
Sure.
That's my hope. Anything else you need, or your folks, your devotees want to say? Okay, so I do
Yes,
have
sir.
one. I'm going to have to set the mic down and pick up my phone because that's where it's stashed. Larry, talk for a minute while I'm finding this. Tell a story.
No, you're the one that had the joke.
Well, I have. Here it is. It's only 4 questions, but it's a dementia test with some humor involved. So exercise of the brain is important as exercise of the muscles. Keep mentally alert, use it or lose it. Here's a private way to gauge, very private, we're in public, to gauge how your memory compares to the last test. So, what do you put in a toaster?
Supposed to be the straight man here?
Yeah, well, yes, or anybody from the audience.
A bagel.
Pardon me?
A bagel. You asked what to put in a toaster. I said a bagel.
Oh, you're right. The answer is bread or toast, but some people would say,
Well, I didn't want to
Bread.
be like everybody,
say silk 10 times.
Silk,
Silk, the word silk 10 times.
silk, 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 silk. That's 10 times.
Now spell silk.
Spell silk as S-I-L-K.
What do cows drink?
Milk.
Water.
Can't believe I fell for that.
Yeah,
So,
I
particularly since my
thought you were
family,
alert.
my father and my uncle ran a dairy farm. So
I remember you telling me that, yeah. Okay, if a red house is made from red bricks, and a blue house is made from blue bricks, and a pink house is made from pink bricks, and a black house is made from black bricks, what is a greenhouse made from?
glass.
Oh, you guys are too good. You're,
Once bitten, twice shy,
there
Dave.
you- yeah, glass. Okay, so no calculators, no devices. A little math question here. You're driving on a bus from New York to Philadelphia. In Staten Island, 17 people got on the bus. In New Brunswick, 6 people got off the bus and 9 people got on. In Windsor, 2 people get off and 4 get on. Trenton, 11 people get off and 16 get on. In Bristol, 3 people get off and 5 people get on. And in Camden, 6 people get off and 3 people get on. And then you arrive in Philadelphia. Without going back to review, how old is the bus driver? How old is the bus driver?
Old enough not to know the answer to this. I have no clue.
In my case, the bus driver is 73. I said, you're driving a bus. That was the opening line, and I put quick past that. So everybody's got a different answer. Larry, thank you very much. I enjoyed the heck out of this today. Gretchen, thank you for setting this up, and everybody out there, be
Yeah.
safe. Thank you.